My name is Ryan Deiss. My partners and I manage 17 companies across our $200 million holding group. So I've learned a thing or two about the personality types that win in business versus the personality types that flounder and ultimately fail. And what I'm going to show you now is our framework for determining your default founder type, as well as the founder type your business needs you to be today. And they're not always the same. So let's get into it. Why do entrepreneurs love personality tests so much? Well, I think it's because we all suffer from the same affliction, and that affliction has a name. It's called imposter syndrome. It is a behavioral health phenomenon that is described as self-doubt of intellect, skills, or accomplishments among high-achieving individuals. In other words, you think you don't belong in the same crowd as your peers. And actually, in a study performed by some of our friends at Kajabi, what they found was that up to 84% of entrepreneurs at some point feel like imposters in business. And it's kind of no wonder that we feel this way. I mean, at the end of the day, most of us have no real formal business training. While we would acknowledge that, yes, we've worked very, very hard, we'd also have to acknowledge, unless we're complete delusional narcissists, that we also got a little lucky along the way. And the ups and downs of the entrepreneurial roller coaster don't help. I mean, if you think about what it was like when you started your business, I bet it looked something like this. It started off initially with this amazing eureka moment. You had an idea and you felt like this idea was going to work. And then in the early days, it was hard and it was a little bit hopeless. But if you made it beyond this point, then you're more than just an entrepreneur, you're actually an entrepreneur. You actually got some traction and you got to that, wait, we might actually have something here a moment. And then if you kept pressing on, then you started to experience that early, yes, it's actually working growth, and maybe that turned into it's time to scale, we're all going to be rich type of pride. And then at some point along the way, we begin to hit a bit of a flat line. At some point along the way, we sort of start to get out over our skis. At some point along the way, we frankly don't really know what we're doing. And that's when we start to think, that's odd. Where's all the growth? And seriously, why isn't this working? And then at some point, it's just I'm a failure and we're obviously all doomed. If this looks familiar to you, then I submit to you, this is why you've likely felt a little bit of imposter syndrome. And it's likely while we're all like flailing around trying to figure out who are we, what are we about, and do we have any business being in business? What it probably means is you just need to shift and pivot your founder type, because unlike all of those other personality tests that you've seen out there that are fixed, the founder type framework that I'm about to give you is designed for it to change as your business changes. That's right. I'm suggesting at this point that if you want your business to scale, that means that you are going to have to scale as well. In other words, if you want your business to change for the better, that means that you are likely going to have to grow and change for the better too. So we did what we always do. We just created it, and we call it the founder type matrix. So what the founder type matrix does is this looks at how entrepreneurs can and should develop over time. So if we're going to look at the Y axis, the up and down, we're going to sort of measure where are you in terms of being more of a visionary strategist, and where are you in terms of more of the operational tactical. Every great entrepreneur that I know, they're going to be somewhere along that spectrum. So where's that for you? Now, a lot of folks would say, oh, I'm more of a visionary, therefore I need to get an operator, or I'm more of an operator, so I need to get some visionaries around me. And that all sounds good, but the reality is sometimes we can't just go pull these people off the shelf. We actually need to change. We need to adapt. But when do we adapt? And when do we change? Well, that has everything to do with the life cycle of our business. And specifically, are we early stage or are we later stage? Now, when you are early stage, what your business needs is it needs vision and it needs strategy. Early on, the founder type that is required is what we refer to as the inventor. And the inventor is the creator of new projects and products. The inventor is driven by trends. They're driven by opportunity. They're driven by their own instinct. You must have someone on the team who is the inventor. And if it's just you, then guess what? If you're in business, likely you occupied this role. So being an inventor alone does not necessarily make you an entrepreneur. You're only an entrepreneur when you take your idea, when you take your invention to market. This is where, frankly, we're going to have to get into some of the operational aspects of business, some of the tactical aspects of business. And this is when we have to shift down and look to become more of the driver. The driver is that primary source of acceleration, that primary source of momentum within the business. But what distinguishes drivers from inventors is that drivers are willing to take an idea and run it across the finish line. In other words, they're willing to take it to market. The entrepreneur is not merely an inventor, But also the entrepreneur is not merely a driver. Salespeople can be phenomenal drivers. You might have a really solid manager that's a great driver. It is the combination of the inventor and the driver that makes the entrepreneur. So if you have a business, if you've launched it, if you've made some sales, then congratulations. You passed through the first two founder types. You started out as the inventor, you shifted into driver. Now the issue is that this is where most entrepreneurs stop, and this is where they get stuck. As businesses scale, and we'll talk more about this in just a second, sheer force of will is not enough. That's why at some point we need to shift over later stage to becoming a builder. They are the architect of the company's operating systems. Builders realize that for the company to scale, it has to scale beyond the 24 hours in a day that the founder or the founding team has. It really does need to move beyond this. And so they're driven by a desire to create that scalability. And they're going to do this through people, and they're going to do this through processes. They create value through people. They create value through systems. This, of all the four founder types, this is the one founder type that most pure entrepreneurs have the hardest time shifting into. What comes next? Well, at some point, we as the CEO, as the founder, need to shift into the fourth founder type, and this is the guide. The guide is the keeper of vision and culture. The guide is driven by a desire to grow strategically. The guide is there primarily to ask questions, and they're okay not having all the answers because the guide knows that they've got a competent team around them that should have the answers. This is the guide. And in my opinion, the guide is the truest expression of a CEO. Very often people say like, oh, so the CEO is the one who's, in the trenches doing all the things. Well, in the early days, fine if you're a founder CEO, but it's very common for most entrepreneurs, for most founders in particular, to start as the inventor, shift over to the driver, become the builder for just a little bit, get some help, and then as soon as the operating system is installed, boom, that's when they want to shift up to guide mode, because the founder, the CEO who stays in builder mode for too long, that's when you become a micromanager. So yes, there are times you need to get in, you do need to micromanage, but if you stay there too long, this is again another stall point for a business. So let's look at these four founder types and let's look at them over the different phases and types of business. And I want you to be thinking along the way, what phase is your business in? This first phase really is that launch zone. This is when you're going from that initial ideation to that moment of traction, to product market fit. And obviously at this phase, what you need more than anything else is an inventor. If we're gonna have some growth, if we're gonna move beyond this, now we're gonna shift into the growth zone. The growth zone is typically between $100,000 and $1 million. This is when you're scaling. At this point, this is when you need a driver. You need in the trenches execution, the kind of in the trenches execution that you're only going to get from a driver. At some point, this is when the limits of the driver are going to become real. This is when you hit the constraint zone. At the constraint zone, now, no matter how efficient, no matter how effective you are eventually going to flatline. That is a sign, that is a signal that we need to shift into builder mode. You're likely working with a UOS where you are the operating system and the operating system is you. We need to shift away from that into a more scalable operating system. That is the work of the builder. Now, interestingly enough, if you don't make this shift, this is when companies eventually go into decline. So if you remain a driver in denial, then you are likely to see the flat line start to dip and go down. And if you wait too long, this is when companies begin to implode. So we don't want to do that. We do not want to stay a driver in denial, right? If we want to scale, we're going to have to become the builder, but we don't want to linger there too long. So at some point, we want to shift into the scalable zone. And when we can, we want to become the guide, okay? The guide really is the elevated role of the entrepreneur. So I got a couple questions for you right now. This is really, really important. What's your default type? Like I said, most of the time, entrepreneurs, the default type is more inventor or it's more driver. Maybe you got a little more of one than the other. Based on where your company is today, what founder type does it need you to be? I just want to offer this suggestion. If your business is stuck, there's a good chance that your business needs you to work outside of your default setting. Growth is always on the other side. It's always just outside of our comfort zone. So if you feel like your business is stuck, there's a good chance that it's because you're continuing to operate within a default setting instead of the role that your company really needs you to operate. When we get this right, when we shift actually into the builder mode sooner, this is when we can avoid the constraint phase completely, not have that flat line, and just keep scaling. If you've never experienced the sheer unbridled joy of watching your team run like a well-oiled machine, you don't know how good this business stuff can be. So if you want help shifting from driver mode into builder mode and ultimately guide mode, that is exactly what we help entrepreneurs do at The Scalable Company. I'm gonna drop a link in the description if you wanna learn more about how to work with us. But for now, just know that if you feel like an imposter, you're not broken and you are definitely not alone. You are definitely not alone. It just might be time to grow into your next founder type. Now, if you found this helpful, drop a comment and let me know. Let's keep the discussion going. And if you know someone who you think this could help, please share this video with them. I would appreciate it, and I know that they would appreciate it too. With that said, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.